I will. Okay. Welcome to Juju's podcast, where I talk about the books that I read and why I read them. Today, we're going to be talking about The Fault in Our Stars. This podcast is kind of like for people who have already read the book. So I'm just going to go straight into the most critical thing I think that changed my perspective and that made this book stick out to me. Out of all the books that I read, why this book is like ingrained into the deepest part of my soul. And that is the fact that I read the end first. Now, I know what you're thinking. I'm not the type of person to read the end of a book first. But I was sitting at the dentist office, I remember, and I was checking the page number, how many pages there were in this book, as one does. And the entire time I was thinking to myself, I was like, look in the bottom corner, look in the bottom corner, look in the bottom corner. Do not read the end. Do not read the end. Do not read the end. I get to the last page. I don't even remember how many pages there are. All I remember is reading, I do, Augustus, I do. Y'all, I thought they were getting married. And spoiler alert, the boy dies. The boy dies a tragic death. And so the entire time he's like going downhill in the second half of the book, the entire time in my mind, I'm like, he's going to get better. He has to get better. They get married. Much to my surprise, they do not get married. He dies a tragic death. And she's reading a letter that he wrote to her after his funeral. Like, that was so damaging to read that book. That book is already damaging just because it's like so emotionally packed, but it made it so much more damaging because I still had hope. I held out hope until like the last 3 chapters. The next thing I want to talk about is the scenes in my brain that are just like burned there for the rest of eternity, because John Green does such a good job of writing books and like just writing books. He's such a good writer. Like, these scenes are ingrained into my brain for the rest of my being. Some writers can write books and I'll be like, yeah, the gist of that book was pretty good. But when I can remember a singular scene, like I watched it in a movie 2 years after I read the book, it was incredible writing. One of those scenes was when they did like the pretend funeral where Augustus was watching his friend and Hazel do the funeral. And then the very next chapter was his actual funeral, or like he passed away and it was his actual funeral. That was damaging because like the fake funeral, then the real funeral back to back. Like, I expected a little bit of time there, but he just went boom, boom. And it just made it that much more real to me. 2 is when he was sitting at the gas station to go get cigarettes and he called her. Like, there's like the rope down his chest. She said that he was like crying when she got there. And he told her, I can't even go get cigarettes anymore. It really showed, like, because at the beginning of the book, he's the healthy one. At the beginning of the book, Hazel's the one that's like, I'm a grenade. I don't want to hurt. I want to hurt as few people as possible. But he was healthy, so he was like, yeah, let me get a girlfriend. Let me get all these friends. And now he's the one that's declining. He's the one that started healthy, and now he's the one that's declining. She's the one that's having to help him. That change and that realization of him was everything to me. That is burned into my head, because to me, Augustus is like this moody teenager who's like, whatever, dude. He's just like ironic. But then, like, the reality of his own situation hits him, and it hits the reader just as hard, because it's like, oh my gosh. Everything Augustus is as a person, he cannot be to the fullest extent anymore because of what's happening to him. And I really like the book because it just feels real. Like, sometimes I'll read sad books. Like, I've read books before and it just was like, oh man, that sucks. That idea sucks. But on this one, I genuinely read it. This was the first book that I like bawled over, that I was like shedding tears. A, because I thought they were going to get married. B, because why would you write grief so realistically? Like, it was so beautifully written. It just tore my soul to shreds. And this may be being a little bit dramatic, but I was not expecting all this from a book. Like, I read this for a school assignment. We had like this school summer required reading and it was on the list. And so I bought it. I was not expecting all this from this book. Okay. I was reading it and we were in this old hotel. It was a really old, musty hotel. I was on a road trip while I was reading this and my family was like all asleep. It was like 1 a.m. and I was reading it. And I remember I started reading that night with like before even the cigarette scene. So like they're in the heat of it, but he hasn't truly started declining yet. And the entire time, like I'm halfway to like the last part of the book and I'm like, he'll get better. They get married. But then in my mind, I'm like, what if he doesn't get married? Or what if they don't get married? And so it just forced me to read the rest of the book. As I was nearing the end, tears were streaming down my face. The hotel was just old and musty. And I was sitting there in this old musty hotel with this strange documentary playing. My family's asleep around me. And I'm silently bawling my eyes out for this couple that's not even real. I woke up the next morning because, like you forget about stuff that happens over the evening. And I woke up the next morning. I was like, oh my gosh, Augustus is dead. I woke up the next morning slightly depressed because Augustus was dead. Like I felt Hazel's grief. In that book, I was Hazel. And it's just like such gorgeous writing about teenagers who are sick and in love. Like the most beautiful writing I've ever seen. Because a lot of times when people write teenagers, they're just like either really angsty or they're not like everyone else. But this felt real. Like I was these characters. I experienced these characters as friends, as boyfriends. It was just so real. Like I felt every single piece of this book. Another thing is also I went back and I reread the part where the two funerals, I reread the two funerals and the part where Hazel is scrolling through social media post-death and she talks about the flood coming in. Honestly, that is one of my biggest fears. One of my biggest fears ever because of this book. This book created that fear. This book created this deep ingrained fear in me that I'm going to fall in love with someone and they're going to pass away. Because Hazel's grief, I never want to feel. Hazel's grief, I never want to feel. And that's not to say other griefs are less than, but John Green just wrote it in such a way that was this is one of my biggest fears. This is genuinely one of my biggest fears, to love somebody and for them to be taken away like that. And the worst part was, I think throughout all of it, is they knew they were going to die. Augustus had that funeral held for them. Or so he could see his own funeral. Hazel wore her funeral dress that she was supposed to wear at her funeral. They knew they were going to die. And yet they chose to love and just live life anyway. I think Hazel changing as a character from not wanting to attach to people because she's afraid to hurt them to living life to its fullest. When they went to Amsterdam, when they drank the champagne, that to me was the most felt. She knows she's going to die and yet she's choosing to live this life anyway. I feel if I were in that situation, it would very much be oh, I'm going to die anyway. It doesn't matter. But Hazel still chose to make connections. She still chose to make the most of what she had, even though she knew it was coming to an end. Another thing is Augustus knew about his cancer while they were in Amsterdam. And he kept that from her until I don't remember. Again, it was 2 years since I've read this book. I don't remember exactly. I know that he kept it from her for a minute to let her have her time in Amsterdam, or it was something like that. To me, that was also because I never could have kept that to myself. If I loved somebody and I got cancer, I would have to tell them immediately because imagine how hard that would be to sit there and mull that over and think about their reaction. Wait a while and then go do it. Having to keep that to myself from someone that I love, that would be so hard. Having to tell them would also be really hard. And then having to continue to live life and having to continue to love after that, after I thought I was better, after I thought I'd overcame, so hard. That book hit me so incredibly hard. So take a read, guys. I think that sad books really are my thing. I love sad books. If a book makes me bawl like this one, it definitely hits top 10 for me. If you like sad books, please read The Fault in Our Stars. I know I already gave like all the spoilers, but the writing is just good. There's a reason this book is well known. There's a reason. There's a reason this book is famous. There's a reason that people love this book. It's an amazing book. So you should take a read. So that is one of the books I read and why I read it and what kind of what I liked about it. So yeah, that's it.